It's been nearly a month since the death of a 22-year-old Kurdish woman in police custody, which sparked demonstrations. Mahsa Amini had been detained for breaching Islamic dress codes. Women have been at the forefront of the defiant protests and often facing a violent response from the police. We begin our coverage with this report from our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley.
These are scenes that have stunned Iranians and inspired people around the world. Here, schoolgirls take off their headscarves. For 40 years, women have been made to wear them, whether they like it or not. But extraordinary acts of defiance are now taking place against a regime that's controlled what half the population wears and how they all behave for so long. And look at what these children are doing to portraits of Iran's supreme leader. It's a month since a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, went on a fateful and fatal trip to the capital, Tehran. She was stopped by Iran's morality police, who were unhappy with the way she was wearing her hijab. Witnesses say she was beaten before she ended up in a coma and died. This was her funeral in her hometown in the west of the country. Her grieving family wrote on her gravestone that she would live on and become a symbol, as she has. A symbol of women and men standing up to the repression of the Iranian regime. The Islamic Republic was set up in 1979 when the Shah of Iran was overthrown. Not long afterwards, women were made to wear the hijab, though some did challenge it.
The Shah pulled the chador down by force. These people are putting it up by force.
The regime has successfully crushed all protest movements before now with brute force. But this time it faces a deeper challenge, as people from all walks of life say they want nothing less than an end to the Islamic Republic. Azadeh Moaveni has just returned from Iran, where she witnessed some of the protests.
I don't think there's ever been a generation under the Islamic Republic that's so different to the ruling authorities. They are fearless, they are plugged into the internet, they are sophisticated, they are worldly, they are educated, and they are more secular and liberal in their lifestyle than probably any generation before them.
So where do you think this will all go?
It's hard to see things ever going back to how they were before. You know, the morality police, I think, will never be able to resume their patrols in Iran. They're forever tainted by having killed a young, innocent girl. So I think we're just at a precipice moment where sort of both sides are sort of staring each other down. It's really quite frightening.
This 16-year-old Serena Esmailzadeh has become a new face of the protests, killed by security forces, as was 16-year-old Nikah Shakarami, their deaths only fueling Iranians' fury. Red paint on the hands of students in Tehran this week, powerful commentary on a regime now facing an unprecedented crisis of legitimacy. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
With me in the studio, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Lise, so good to have you with us. 4 weeks in, how much momentum is there in these protests, as far as you can tell?
Well, 4 months in from the arrest of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, her death sparked this unprecedented wave of protest across 31 provinces of Iran. The momentum is not dying, it's intensifying. It has drawn in, as we've been reporting day in, day out, people from all walks of society, all generations, minorities, even though predominantly it is the young generation, men and women, although women are leading it, under the age of 25. But we're also seeing that the government is not backing down either. So far, over the past month, it has used its security forces, and they have deployed tear gas, metal pellets. There are persistent reports of live fire as well. There are images coming out from Iran overnight that they're using machine guns mounted on the back of pickups. We have to, of course, look at these videos and get them verified. But they still haven't used their loyal elite Revolutionary Guards yet, the backbone of the Islamic Republic. So they have more in their armory. The big question, as always in protests of these kinds, is how much more do the protests have in their engine driving these demonstrations?
So despite the violence that they have used already, they're still holding something back.
They still are holding something back. And we have heard leading political, clerical officials criticizing the use of force to deal with these protests. One leading figure even said it's time to rethink the compulsory hijab, the wearing of headscarves, which was imposed just shortly after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. But there is a red line for all of those who are tied to this Islamic Republic, and that is the survival of this republic. And the protests have developed in such a way that while the hijab being waved in the air, the hijab being burnt in a bonfire, the hijab being ripped up, has become a symbol of this movement, if you want to call it that, although it's leaderless. It has spread to other concerns: corruption, mismanagement, rising prices, costs of living, the whole gamut of the fire it's lit has touched a nerve in so many other ways.
We've seen protest movements over recent decades. Is this one different? What has this one changed?
Everyone is they're looking at the history of protests in Iran. There have been many protests over many years over many issues. In recent years, there have been protests about water shortages, about price hikes, about the hijab, much more limited protests. There are not the millions on the street as in 78, 79, in 2009, after the disputed presidential elections. The casualties are not as high, even in the 2019 protests over price rises. So some things are different about it. But there are also elements which are similar, for example, to the wave of protests we came to call the Arab Spring across the Arab world in the Middle East in 2010, 2011, and on. Young people saying with pride, this is a leaderless movement. But we've seen, without a leader, you don't have anywhere to coalesce. You can't develop a program. You can't develop who's going to stand in if indeed their wish for the end of the regime comes true. And those protests didn't succeed. Some of the dictators they ousted are back in power, or the protesters are in jail, or it led to wars. Every country has a different culture, a different context, and will have a different beginning, middle, and end. And this has not ended yet.
Lise, thank you very much. Lise Doucet.